Oh boy, here I go, talking about Fate again. We are now over halfway through 2017. Time flies, am I right? The year of Fate, a year with new adaptations and spin-offs hoping to solidify Fate as one of the most convoluted franchises in recent memory. So today I'm harking back to one of my older opinions on the Fate franchise, an opinion that I would like newcomers to heed when they decide to delve into this rather daunting series, and that is to watch Studio Deen's Fate Stay Night from 2006, lovingly referred to as Deen Stay Night.
Say what, motherfucker?
I know I am quite alone with this opinion. Fans of the original visual novel will balk at this, saying that you're wasting your time on an unsuccessful adaptation. Watchers of anime in general will agree, as the latter adaptations by Ufotable far exceed Deen Stay Night in both storytelling and production value. But even with those very valid points, I still believe that there is a place in everyone's watching order for Deen Stay Night. More importantly, it's what you should watch first. Figuring out where to start with Fate is almost as daunting as the actual consumption of it. Not only that, but the fact that in North America there aren't any official localizations of the original visual novel makes it even harder to find a good starting point. The visual novel came out in Japan in 2004, but the fan translation patch didn't hit the net until early 2008. Fate's sequel, Hollow Ataraxia, came out in Japan a year after the original in 2005, yet it took until 2014 for an English patch to finally get done up. At this point, we have 9 years of lore from the Fate franchise that started to build up, and we've reached a tipping point and had all of that material come crashing down on us. As such, it's almost impossible to be a casual fan of Fate anymore. To be a fan, you need to dive into the myriad of Holy Grail wars, the alternate universes, and timelines. We've reached a scale that's more complicated than trying to play through all the Kingdom Hearts games in preparation for Kingdom Hearts 3 that's coming out. Whenever it's coming out. Now, if you can survive the tidal wave of content by going through the visual novels in chronological order, that would be the best way of going about learning Fate. But since none of those original game patches are official, it can be a bit of work trying to get them up and running. Starting with finding a Japanese copy of the game. Like I did. Which can be quite expensive nowadays. All in all, the niche nature of patching foreign games doesn't mesh so well with the mainstream status the Fate franchise is getting closer and closer to. So then, for us Western fans, the most reasonable option remaining is bingo, watching Deen Stay Night. The original visual novel is an epic tome of a story. Like most visual novels, it plays like a choose-your-own-adventure, where you control the choices of Shiro Emiya as he attempts to learn about and survive the Fifth Holy Grail War. I say attempts because if you choose wrong, he will fail. A lot. Now, as far as adapting this for anime, there is quite a bit of story that would need to get cut for the sake of narrative. Bad endings, for example, would have no place anymore. It would be confusing for people to have the characters die every couple of episodes only to have them be fine the following week. Some stories have narrative tropes that can explain this away, but Higurashi, this ain't. So, that has to go. Fate also has what we call roots, separate stories that cover major what-if scenarios that differ from one another, despite involving the same characters and the same timeline. Roots are usually put in place not only to tell these different stories, but also to add a layer of replayability. Some games have you replay through the same scenario, but from another character's perspective, like in Nier Automata, for example. But Fate's roots are a bit unique. The three roots, Fate, Unlimited Blade Works, and Heaven's Feel, all tell the same general story of the same Grail War, but with each new route, the story becomes increasingly darker. They each build upon what has occurred in the previous route without actively referencing them, because you can't play through them out of order. The game just won't allow you to do that on your first time. So when translating this order to the adaptations is where things get messy. There are the two clean-cut versions of Unlimited Blade Works and soon-to-be Heaven's Feel routes that are easy enough, but the initial Fate route of the novel has never had a proper adaptation. And to be fair, the Fate route acts more like a prologue to the story as a whole, and less of something that could stand alone. So, Deen Stay Night's adaptation had to be based on the Fate route, because they couldn't dive headfirst into the latter two routes, because the groundwork just wasn't there. But making a pure adaptation of the Fate route would not have worked either. It just wouldn't have been a substantial television show if they did that. So they took matters into their own hands, and this is where people have problems with it. For the most part, it is an adaptation of Fate. It follows the timeline, most of the same events, but in the latter part of the series, things diverge, and Deen gave the story its own original ending, one that became a semi-amalgamation of plot points from the other two routes. You can argue about if their anime original ending was any good. In fact, I have. But considering what Deen had to work with at the time, they did an admirable job. There was no right answer for what they could have done, though even if other routes and other adaptations have done the material better, Deen's Stay Night is still the best introduction that you can have to Fate, barring playing the original visual novel, of course. It contains enough of the original route so that you have that groundwork for what lies ahead. It also gives you little sneak peeks into the major plot revelations of the other routes. Speaking of plot revelations, this is the exact reason why I would recommend for you to watch Deen's Stay Night first over Fate Zero. Many people will recommend Zero as the best starting point because in chronological order, it is the first. Sure, there is story and lore that happened before this, but that hasn't been adapted yet and may never be. So, Zero is the earliest that you can go, but there are some inherent problems with starting at Zero. If you take nothing else from this video, I want you to take one thing away. You ignore all else, do not ignore this one thing. Do not watch Fate Zero first. Zero is a prequel, written with the intent that the audience would, or at least should, have the full knowledge of some of the basic plot points from Fate's Stay. Personal revelations about several characters are in Zero from the get-go. Those same revelations take far longer to surface in the Fate storyline, so it spoils you to it. It changes the entire dynamic of the story if you start here. On top of which, one of the greatest tragedies in Fate Zero is that it is assumed the audience knows how futile all the events of the story are. Now, if you want to know more about how Fate Zero works as a tragedy, you should check out my friend Eric's video, which does the subject much more justice, as it goes a bit more in-depth. But basically, it's because we know the ending. We know the fates of all of these characters, even though they try so desperately to carve their own paths.
Kiritsuga Emiya's wish is humanity's salvation, an end to all warfare and bloodshed and suffering forever. True peace upon the earth.
There's even a countdown timer throughout Zero, counting down to the predetermined event that sparks the beginning of Fate's Stay Night. Starting at Zero is like watching Star Wars, but beginning with Episode 1. You know nothing of the struggles of Luke and Leia and Han, but the story is framed with those events in mind. So, what are the other options then? Well, you could start with Ufotable's UBW adaptation, but then we have a different problem. Ufotable sped through a crap ton of early plot points because, like the material it was adapting, it assumed that you already knew the events of the Fate route.
Then let us go back to the beginning.
Oh, Kirei, shut up!
Unlimited Blade Works is a perfect adaptation of the Unlimited Blade Works route, but it is not a good adaptation of Fate's Stay Night as a whole, and it felt very incomplete.
Your excessive stupidity hurts my head, you idiot.
You know, you're the idiot around here, and you call me an idiot? Well, that makes you even more of an idiot.
Lastly, I'm going to assume that even though Heaven's Feel is not out yet, that it's going to do the same sort of plot skipping that UBW did, because they will assume you've seen the older material, and why spend the money reanimating that? What do you think this is? Endless 8? If you want my personal watch order so that you can get the most out of the adapted material, here's what you should do. Start with Deen's Stay Night. This gives you a good groundwork and an introduction to most of the major characters that you need to know about. Move on to Zero after that. This keeps the revelations from Fate in mind as the story progresses. Then watch Ufotable's UBW release, and finally, the upcoming Heaven's Feel adaptations. This, I think, is the most optimal. Of course, there are some optional things to watch as well, like Fate Prism Ilia, if you like that sort of thing, and the magnificent Carnival Phantasm. My god, watch Carnival Phantasm. But with both of those, I would still recommend watching Deen's Stay Night first for that groundwork. Then feel free to, well, do whatever you want. Fate is one of my favorite anime franchises, but even I haven't been able to keep up with all of the extra material. If you can, power to you. But for now, I'm sticking to what I know, and that's anime. Even then, Fate is still really, really big, and it's only getting bigger. So I hope that this video is helpful for anyone looking for a good way to approach it. Thank you for sticking it out until the end of the video. A thank you to all of my patrons, including Joshua Garcia, Hedro Leon, Bing Theo, Calhoun Boy, Siri Yamako, and Victor Ekmark. You guys are all especially awesome. And until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty.